In this video, we'll be seeing how to implement CRUD operations in Android. We'll be using PHP APIs for this. So let's get started with the PHP part. I have created a new folder inside the htdocs folder of the SAMP installation. You can see it here. Let's create a new file and name it create.php. So we'll be performing create, read, update and delete. So let's start with the create part. For that, start the PHP tag. We have to connect to the database first. So let's go to our SAMP and open the PHP MyAdmin panel. Now let's click on the admin and go to PHP MyAdmin panel. So you can see the PHP MyAdmin panel has opened. So let's create a new database. So let's name it CRUD. So we have created a database named CRUD, and now we have to create a table. So let's create the name like CRUD table. And we'll be needing only 2 columns for now. So the first one will be the ID of the table. So the type will be int and we have to set it to auto increment and primary key. So I will zoom out and add those. You can see under the index option, the primary key. Click that and click go. Now you have set the ID as primary key. Now you can set the auto increment option. This AI means auto increment. Now you have to create the second field, that is data. You can set the type as text and click save. That's all. Now we have created the table. Go to the PHP part. Here you have to connect to the database that we have created right now. For that, create a variable $con. Now to connect to the database, we are using MySQL connect. Now we have to provide the host name. So the host name is localhost. And the second parameter is the username. And by default, SAMP is having the username root. And the password is blank. Just leave it blank. Now this is the default username and password inside the SAMP. So you can set it like this. And now we have to pass the database name. So the database name is CRUD. So we have connected to the database here. Now you can check if the connection is successful or not. Here we have checked if the connection variable is true. If it's true, we can execute the rest of the code. Otherwise, we will print failed to connect to the database. Now inside the if condition, we have to create an SQL query for inserting. Create a variable $SQL. Now we have to write the SQL. Insert into table. Now we have to give the table name, and the table name is CRUD table. Inside this, we have to specify the column names. We are having 2 columns. The first one is ID, which is auto incrementing. So we don't have to insert it. And the second one is data. So let's give the column name data. We can have as many as columns as you need. We are only having 1, so we are using it. Now we have to set the value. Now here we have to pass the value which we have to insert to the row. So for that we'll be receiving it from the Android app. So let's create a variable on the top. $data equal to $post. We'll be creating a post variable because we'll be sending a post request from the Android. And let's give the name like data itself. Yeah, now you can check if the post data is empty or iset or not. If not empty of $post data. Now start the if condition. and we have to close it at the bottom. Give a semicolon at the SQL this part. Okay. Now that's all. Now if we are having the post variable here, if it is not empty and if the post variable is set, we will continue executing the other code. Otherwise, we will not execute anything. If you want, you can set an else part to show some error message. So inside the if condition, here inside the SQL query, we have to set the value for this data. So the value is $data. Now we have to give this data inside a single quote. So come here and close the double quotes and use the dot operator and give a dot here and start the double quotes. So this is our SQL query. Now we have to execute the SQL query. For that, you have to write if. Since this is an insert operation, you don't need to store the value that will be returned from the execution of the query to a variable. So you can write it like if MySQL query. And the first variable will be the connection variable. The second one is the SQL query. And if this is true, you can print success. Else you can echo insertion failed, an error message like that. Okay. Now that's all with the insertion part. So we have done the create part of the CRUD with the PHP. Now we have to create the read part. For that, create a new file and name it read.php. Now you can copy this code from here and paste it here. You won't be needing this, so remove it. And you can also remove this from here. And you can reformat the code by typing Ctrl-Alt-L in Windows. Now we have set the database connection inside this. First of all, we can create all the files and set the database connection. So it will be easy. So copy this much and create another file named update.php. Now paste this here and create another file delete.php and paste this here also. Now go back to read.php. Inside this, if the database connection is successful, you can read the data from the table. So $SQL equal to select star from table name, and the table name is CRUD table. Now that's the SQL query for getting all the values inside the table. If you want to set an condition, like if you are having a username and all, for example, if you are fetching the data of a logged in user using the username, you have to pass the username like this as a post variable. Instead of the data, you can pass the username and you can receive it here and pass it to a variable. Then you can write it like this in the SQL query, where, and you can give the condition. If it is a username, you can do like username. And if it is ID, we are only having two columns, okay, ID and data. I will show you in the database. Here you can see we are only having ID and data. So we can use ID here, okay. So where ID equal to, now we have to give the value of the ID. For example, we are not receiving the ID right now, so let's give it 1. So now what happens is it will select all the data where the ID is 1. So that's all. It will only return the value where the ID is 1. So that's how you can do that. We are receiving all the data for this example. So let's remove this. Now let's run this. We have to store the value that we receive after running this SQL to a result variable. Now you have to check if the table is empty or not. For that, if MySQL num rows, pass the result variable here, not equal to 0. Open the if condition. Inside this, we can start the while loop. While $row equal to MySQL fetch assoc. So this function, and pass the result variable. Now open the while loop. So here we are receiving each rows. So if you are having 10 rows, we will receive each rows here. So here you can assign these rows to a variable. For that, create a variable on the top. You can create something like $data equal to array. So let's set this as an array, and outside the while loop, you can start $i equal to 0. Set the value of I equal to 0, and on the bottom line, you can set $i plus plus. Okay, now above that, you can get the value from the row and assign it to the data variable. So $data of $i of data. Okay, now we can remove this dollar of data from here, and you can assign the $row here. Okay, now we are assigning the row to an array. Okay, hope you understand what's happening here. Now outside the while loop, you can print this as a JSON format. So for that, echo JSON encode. Now you can simply give the array name here, that is $data. Now this will print an JSON of the data that we receive from the table. Okay, now our read.php part is completed. We will test all these at the end. Let's complete the API part first. So let's go to the update.php. Now here you have to create the SQL query and also receive the data like we have done in the create part. So let's copy this much from here and let's paste it here, and go to the bottom and you can close it here. Okay, now for updating a data, we have to receive something like if you are updating only one row, you have to receive the ID of the row. We are only having ID and data, so we have to receive the ID. If you are having username or email, etc., you can receive the email of the user or something like that. So we'll be receiving the ID. So you can check if the ID is also present or not. Now you can assign the variable. Okay, now we are having the ID and the data. Now we have to create the SQL query. That is update table name set values then. Okay, I will show that. Set data equal to, now we have to pass the value. So in order to pass the value, you have to start the single quotes and you have to close the double quotes, and you have to give the dot operator here. Give one more dot, and inside this you have to pass the data variable. Okay, and you have to come here and give a space and type the where condition, where ID equal to $ID. Can go outside here and give $ID semicolon. Okay, now this is our update SQL query. You can see update table name set data. Now this is the column name that we have set on the table. We are having only two columns, that is ID and data. So remember that you can have as many as columns as you want. So column name equal to the new data, where this is the condition. If you don't add this condition, it will change all the rows. It will change all the rows and set the column data to the data that is specified here. Okay, so we should add this, otherwise it will change all the values. Okay, where id equal to the id specified. Now we have to run this. Now you can simply copy this from here because it is exactly the same. Okay, now paste it here. Now you can type an else part also. Else echo like update operation failed or something. Now you can see the update query will be executing here and it will return a true, and if it is true you will echo success, otherwise you will echo update operation failed. Okay, that's all. Now you can print the database error also here. Simply copy it from here. So let's add this on all the pages. So the if condition for connection variable, now you can paste it here. Make sure you add the else part properly. I'm adding this else part for the if $connection variable. Okay, and go to the update part. You can see the if condition for connection variable is here. Paste it here. This one you can avoid it, or you can also add an else part for this also. I'm avoiding it. So let's go to the delete.php. We have completed the update.php part. Now go to the delete.php. So here we have to simply delete a variable. We need an where condition also. So you have to pass the id. So let's copy this much from here. Okay, now paste it here. And you have to close the if condition at the bottom. Okay, now we need to delete. So you don't need the data, so you can remove this and also this. To delete, you just need the id, or if you are having username or email or something, then you can use that also. You need a unique value. Okay, id will be always unique because we have set it to primary key. Okay, now inside this we have to write the query for delete $SQL. Now the delete query will be like delete from table name, then the condition. So now you can see delete from table name, that is CRUD table, where id equal to the id that we have fetched from the Android. Okay, this id will be passing it from the Android. Okay, we have not done that part yet, so we will get to that. So this is the delete query. Now you have to simply run this. You can simply copy this here and paste it here. You can change the else part like fail to delete. That's all. So now you are complete with the delete part also. Okay, let's copy the connection failed else part also and paste it here. Okay, hope you understand how to create the API part. Now we have completely done with the API part. Okay, this is all that you have to do in the API part, that is the PHP part. Now you have to go to the Android. Here you can see that I have created a new project. Now let's go to the resources, layout, activity, main XML file, and let's add edit text and a button. So first of all, remove the parent layout and make it linear layout. Set the orientation to vertical and also set the gravity to center. Now inside this, you can create the edit text. Now let's give it the ID, values, value. I have set the ID for the edit text, value. Let's give it an hint. Now let's create a button. Give it the ID submit. Now give the text submit. Okay, now you can see that we have created a edit text and a button. So we'll be entering the data on the edit text and we'll be clicking the button to submit the data to the database. So that's all with the XML part. Now go to the activity main Java part. Now you have to create objects for both edit text and button view. So edit text equal to find view by ID r.id.values. Now this is the ID that we have given for the edit text. Now let's create the object for button. Find view by ID r.id.submit. Now you can see a red error showing here. You have to simply click on the build icon on the top. That's all. Now the error will go. Now let's create an on-click listener for the button. So button dot set on-click listener, new on-click listener. Now inside this, we have to get the data from the edit text to a variable. So create a string data equal to edit text dot get text dot to string. Okay. Now we have to use a library called Volley to make a post request to the API that we have created. If you want to know more about Volley, you can see this video, Google Volley Android get and post method implementation in our YouTube channel. I will give the link to this video on the description, so you can watch that. Now go to the blog post. I will give the link to this blog post also in the description. You can see that we have steps to implement the Google Volley. Come to this line and copy the implementation part and go to the Android project. Now go to the Gradle scripts and build Gradle second file and come to the bottom and you can see the dependencies. Now paste the dependency here and click the sync now. You can close the build Gradle file. Now go to the blog post, scroll down, you can see that we have to add the permission for internet on the manifest. We will add that later. Now if you scroll down further, you can see an option for creating a post request. So you can copy this much from here and go to the Android project. And you can paste the lines here. Now you can see everything in red. So simply click on the red and type Alt plus enter. This will import the class. So do it for all the other parts. Now you can see text view in red. Simply remove this line. Remove this line also. And here on the context part, you can change this to get application context. That's all. Now in the string URL, you have to replace this with the API URL. Okay. Now on the on response part, you will get the response from the API. Now we can provide the URL of our API. For that, open command prompt, type ipconfig. You can see an IPv4 address. So copy this and you can paste it here. Before that, type http://. Do not use HTTPS since we are not having a SSL certificate. So use http:// then the IP address /. Now you have to give the folder name that we have given for our project. So I have given the name CRUD Android /. Now we can provide the file name. Now we are going to do the create part first. So create.php. Now, if you are having any doubts about this URL, you have to have the XAMPP installed and you have to place this inside the htdocs folder inside XAMPP installation. So I have kept it inside the htdocs folder. Now inside that, you will get this much. It will open to the htdocs folder. Now after that, we have to specify the folder name, then the file name. Okay. Now let's try opening this inside the browser. You can see that the URL works. I have opened it inside the browser. If this was not found, it will show an error message. So the URL is found. So let's go to the project. Now we have to specify our parameters that we are going to pass. So first you have to pass the key. So the key will be data. If you don't know what this key is, go to the API part, and here on the create.php you can see we are having post data. Okay, this one is the key value. Okay, now you can see inside the read we don't have anything like that. Inside the update we are having data and also ID. Inside delete we are having ID. So these are the keys that you should use, ID and data. Okay, so the data, in this case we are using the data. If you are giving a different name like data, let's take an example like data1. If you are giving the post data1, you have to change it everywhere. Okay, here also you have to make it data1, and also on the Android side you have to use data1. We are using data. So data key, then you have to pass the value. Now the value is data. Now this is the variable that we have created on the top. You can see it here, string data, and we get the value from the edit text. Now this is the key and this is the value. Okay, you can pass many, like simply duplicate this. If you want to pass the ID, you can pass it like ID and pass the ID value. Okay, like this. So you can keep on adding the fields like that. Okay, now we are passing only 1. Now inside the onResponse part, you can check if the response string returns as success or not. If response equals success, if the response is success, you can perform the toast message like toast.makeText and give a value like data added. Okay, that's all. Now on the else part, you can give a toast message and give a value like something like fail to add the data, or you can simply print the response variable because we are passing the error message from the API. So that's all. Now we have set the toast message. If it is success, we will show data added. Otherwise, we will show the response variable that has the error message. Okay. Now inside the on error response, you can log this to the error section. For that, log.e error dot get localized message. Oh, now you have to give this inside double quotes. Okay, that's all. Now that's all with the Android part also. If you want to know more about the Google Volley, I have already created the video explaining this. You can check that video. So let's try running this. Before try running this, you can go to the manifest and add the permission for internet. So don't forget to do this. Now, since we are using HTTP, you have to add this line. Okay, here you have to add clear text traffic and set this to true. Okay, make sure you add this line. Okay. And you can close the manifest. Now we can try running this inside the emulator. Okay. Now let's type some data like data 1 and let's click the submit button. You can see the toast message data added. Okay. Now let's go to the PHP MyAdmin. Now you can see the table. If you refresh this, you can see data 1. See, you can see an ID automatically created and the data, that is data 1. Okay, now let's try update query, or you can try adding some more data. So go to Android. Now let's type data 2 and click submit. Okay, data added. One more, data 3 and click submit. Data added. Okay, now go to the database. Now you can see there are 3 rows inside the table. So data 1, data 2 and data 3. Now let's try updating the value. Now to call the update API, you have to change this here. Let's minimize the emulator and change the create.php to update.php. Okay. Now we have to pass the ID for update. Okay. So Control D, you can duplicate this line and add an ID. Now the key name is ID. Okay. And pass the ID of the row. You have to use double quotes. So you have to give the ID here. If you are using it to update something belonging to the logged in user, you can pass a username or email here. Okay. So email and username will be unique for each user. So you can use that and pass the username or email here like this. Okay. We are only having ID and data. So we are using the ID for now. And I am simply giving the ID by manually. So give the ID here. So we'll be updating the first row. Okay. Now let's try running this. Okay. Open the emulator, run the app, and let's type some value. Let's type updated value. Updated text. Okay. And click submit. Data added. Okay. Now go to the table. And if you refresh, you can see updated text. See? And this is updated for only the first one. That is with the ID 1. Okay. Now if you want to update it for 2, you have to simply give the ID 2. That's all. It's very simple. Now let's try deleting the value. So for that, you have to change the update.php to delete.php. Okay. Here you have to pass the ID and you don't have to pass the data. So you can remove the data. You just have to pass the ID of the row. Okay. So we are passing the ID, that is 1. We are deleting the first row. Okay. So you can change the toast message if you want to do that. And let's do that. Delete. Done. Okay. Now I am simply updating this line itself. We can create more and more. So let's try running this. Now if you click the submit button, it will delete. Okay. If you simply click this, it will delete. Okay. So let's try. You don't have to enter anything here because here you can see button on click. We are simply receiving this data, but we are not using this. See, it's in gray. Okay. And we are calling the delete.php file. And here we are checking if it is successful. We will print the toast message. And that's all. We are passing the ID to delete. Okay. So this edit text is simply there. Okay. So let's click the submit. It will do the deletion. Okay. You can see deletion done. Now let's go to the table. Now if you refresh the table, you can see the first row has been removed. So that's all. Now let's do the read operation. So let's remove this simulator and let's change this to read.php. Now this is the API URL for reading the data from the table. So let's try opening this inside the browser first. Now let's zoom this and you can see the data. Let me just print this in a pretty way. For that, go to the read.php part and give a comma here and add JSON pretty print. Okay, this one. Okay, and on the top you can pass a header. Add this to the top header. Okay, and that's all. Now let's try running this. Refresh this page and you can see this is formatted properly. Okay, now first of all we are having JSON array and then we are having JSON objects. Okay, you can see first we are having an array. This is an array. Okay, this square bracket stands for array and this one stands for objects. Okay, so we are having a JSON array, then objects one after another. So we have to parse this JSON string and we have to print this data in some view. Okay, so go to the Android. So here you can remove this if condition because we are receiving a JSON string here. So now create an object for JSON array equal to new JSON array of response. Okay, now you can see an error here. Click here and you can see, if you hover over this error, you can see a message like surround with try catch. Okay, so click here and type Alt plus enter and click enter for the surround with try catch. Now you can see a try and catch has been added. See, that's all. Now inside this try we are having our JSON array. Now in this line we have taken the array from the response string. Now we are having the array. Now you can loop through this array of JSON objects. Okay, this is an array which has many JSON objects inside it. So for that, for I equal to 0, create a for loop, less than now we have to get each JSON objects. For that, JSON object and create an object equal to JSON array dot get JSON object. Now inside this we have to specify the index, that is I. Now that's all. Now you will get each JSON object inside this JSON object variable. Okay, now you can access each data like let's create a variable for the data, string data equal to JSON object dot get string. Okay, inside that pass the name of the key, that is the key name. Okay, the key is data. I will show what the key means. You have to pass this inside the double quotes and remove the single quotes. Okay, like this. Okay, now I will say what this name means. Go to the JSON response. Now in this JSON response string you can see we are having ID, data, and we are again having the next ones ID and data. So this is the name that you have to use there. Okay, now data and ID. Okay, if you need to get the ID you have to use ID. If you need to get the data you have to use this data. So if you call with this name you will get this data. Okay, this is the value and this is the key. And now if you want to call the ID also, you can simply create an variable for ID and call the ID also, just like that. Okay, now if you want to Now you have to set this data to some view. So since this is a example video, we are going to set this data to a text view. You can set this inside a list view or recycler view and create an amazing UI. If you want to see a video on list view, I will give the link on the description. I will also give it on the info tag. You can check that out. So let's set this inside a text view. So for that, go to the activity main XML file and create a text view here on the top. Let's give the ID something like result. Okay. Now you can set the text size. Now that's all. So let's go to the Java and you can create an object on the top for the text view. So text view equal to find view by ID r.id dot result. You don't have to worry about this error. If you click on the build, it will go away. Okay, that's all. So come here on the for loop and you have to set the value to the text view. So for that, text view object dot set text. Now you have to pass the value that you have to set. So let's set the ID and also the data like one after another. I will show you how we are going to do that. So ID equal to, and now you can give the ID. Now give a plus and give a space and give the data equal to, and again give a plus, call the data variable. Now at the end use a plus and call /n. Okay, that's all. This is next line. Okay, for reading you don't have to pass the parameter here because we are not receiving any parameter on the PHP side. So let's remove this for now. We will see how to use the parameter also. If you want to keep this here, there's no problem in keeping. You don't have to pass any value. That's all. You can remove this this much from here, and that's all. Okay, you can do like this, but you can also keep this here. No problem in passing the value, but we are not using it. Okay, but we will show you how to use this. Okay, so let's try running this. Open the emulator. Okay, now you can see the emulator is open. Now let's try clicking the button. See, now it fetches the data and ID equal to 3 and data equal to data 3. Now this is because the data is getting overridden. We are using the function that is set text. So first of all, the value will be 2 and data 2. Then when the loop runs again, it will set the next text. Okay, so instead of set text, you have to use append. So that's all. Now this will do the task. Run the app and click submit. See, now we are having all the data 1 and data 2. This is the row 1 and row 2. Okay, now let's see how to fetch value using an ID. Okay, we will pass the ID and we will see how to fetch the data of that specific ID only. Okay, here on the Java part, you can see that we are passing the parameter ID, key ID and value 1. Okay, so go to the PHP part, take the read.php and we have to receive the ID here. For that you can do like $ID equal to $post of ID. Now you are receiving the ID to this variable. If you want to check if the ID is empty or not, you can check it like this. Okay, we are not going to show that. We don't have to stretch the video longer, so you can check that just like this. Okay, simply call this if condition, copy from here and paste it here. That's all. So we are getting the ID and we are going to use it in the SQL query here. Okay, after this, type a where condition ID, where ID equal to $ID dot. Okay, you have to use a dot $ID. See, now we will only fetch the data where the ID equals to the ID that we have passed. Okay, so let's go to the Android. Okay, now here you can see that we are passing the parameter ID 1. Okay, so we'll be fetching everything with the ID 1, but we don't have any ID 1. You can see the data, we are only having ID 2 and ID 3 because we deleted the ID 1. So let's change this to 2. Now let's try running this. Now you can try clicking the submit button. Now you can see the only one row is visible, that too with the ID 2. Let's try changing it to 3 and try running this. Click the submit. You can see ID 3. So that's all. Now if you wish to download the full source code of this video, the API part and the Android part, also the database, you can download it from this. I will give the link to this on the description. Right now I haven't uploaded it. I will upload it and you can see it on the first page. I will give the exact link to download it. So you can check the description and download the full source code if you want to download it. Hope you understand how to do the CRUD operations in Android. So you simply have to do the API part like this: create, read, update and delete. Then you simply have to do the Android part. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for more such videos.